So good afternoon, everybody. I guess it's 12 noon, so yes, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be answering a very timely question on why Scrum. So my name is Carl Sawatsky. I'll be hosting the event, and today we're very happy to have with us Mr. David Dame. He's a Toronto-based consultant, certified trainer, and has had much experience leading large-scale Agile projects throughout his career. So he brings with him a lot of technical knowledge, experience in the area of Agile and Scrum, but most importantly, the ability to deliver that in a very engaging format. So I'm certain you'll all enjoy this presentation with Dave. We like this to be an interactive event, so you do all have the ability to post any questions or comments in the chat box or as a Q&A, and we'll address these questions as we go along. So don't be shy. Please feel free to pose these questions to David as we go along. So without any further ado, I'd like to pass as our presenter, and thank you again for joining us. David, please take it away.
Thank you for introducing me, and thank you for everybody that joined us today. I'm really excited to share with you why Scrum. So as you heard earlier, I'm a trainer, but I've also worked in a lot of large organizations to really help them implement Agile practices and processes. And these are companies from all different sizes, from startup all the way to big enterprise. But the reason why we decide to go to Agile is if you look at how software traditionally was developed, it didn't really give us much flexibility. We would start a project, we'd go through all the many different phases, requirements, design, coding, all the way to testing. So the only way we could deliver stuff is waiting till we went through all the phases. And we realized, you know, since that approach was based on manufacturing mass production, the traditional waterfall way, we really needed a more empirical way to do it because the way we do it, it isn't straightforward. We're really trying to deal with complexity. So the reason why we're doing Scrum is the benefit to deliver higher value quicker. So we're reducing the batches by trying to do all phases in one period. We're trying to deliver more frequently because that way it allows us to get more feedback for the software we're building, because we can only improve on what's built, not what's conceptualized. And then that way, when working in a team, we really can learn from each other and develop a more robust solution, because really none of us are smarter than all of us. So why Scrum? As I said, software is incredibly complex. If we look at this diagram, you know, you can range from things that are simple to chaotic. And if we look at those things that make software development so complex, it's usually requirements, technology, and people. Requirements is, if they're simple, easy to understand, then they can. But we know as we build more software and getting input from many different stakeholders, we don't usually get agreement, or we have not clarity in the requirements, because the English language can be interpreted many different ways. Overlaid on that is technology. From, like, you know, we know the technology dead solid to technology not being as trivial and very complex. And because now in today's modern software development, we're not really using one technology, we're using a whole host of multiple technologies to do it. And added on top of that again is people. People aren't the same every day, and everybody is different, so it gets to be where it's really unpredictable. But in the software range, we work in the gray area where we're in complex. Because if it's simple, if we look at requirements that everybody agrees and the technology is simple and it's one person, it's dead simple to develop it. But as we move across the axis where requirements are less clear, technology is more complex, and we're dealing with multiple people, we get into the complexity. So that's where we need to move to an empirical process where we try to develop software no longer than 30 days. What we're trying to do is whatever the sprint cadence is, a lot of companies do 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. Whatever we decide is the best for the organization, they do that regular cadence and they try to maintain it all the way along. So they got the ability to inspect and adapt. Is there any questions so far for the why we moved to Scrum before I kind of explain a little bit of the what? So Scrum implements the empirical process, like I said earlier. Really with Scrum, we're looking at getting transparency so we can see exactly where we're at. So that way at the end of every sprint, either from 1 week all the way to 4 weeks, at the end of it, we have software that's been requirements designed, developed, and tested. The reason why it needs to be all done at that cadence is to add transparency. So that way we know what that place is, we know what's going on, we know exactly where we're at. And if we want to, we could potentially ship it at that date. So transparency is we all know what is going on. And then we really want the opportunity at the end of the sprint to really check our work and see how we did. So the end of the sprint is where the team looks at it and begins to get the feedback from all the different stakeholders. Because we have invested many months and years in software development, we have the ability to look at it and make any course corrections as we need. Where traditionally, if you remember, it could go on for a year or many, many months. This way, we're really trying to build something that can be rapidly checked on to really steer to what we want. And that's what I mean. It's okay to change the direction. So we build something, show it. It's not great. Okay, we learned. Now how do we build it in to the next sprint? So that way, even though we know the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but Scrum running in multiple sprints allows us to really, we can't go there in a straight line, but we try to make it as course correcting as possible so there's no radical shifts. What a lot of people usually ask me is, why Scrum? Why do we use that name? And it's really to signify it's a unique thing that we all move together. Because if we look back on the way products used to be developed, it was really handed off between many different silos and many different departments. So what would cause is intransparency of the amount of work being done. So if work shifted from design to development, we would always want to keep the phase before busy with a new project. So not everybody was moving together. Sorry, I looked at the chat window. So in rugby, we want to make sure the team moves as a single unit together to get things done. So that way we all reach the finish line at some point. Where software development used to be built, everybody approached the finish line at different times, which meant the project was never really clear when it was finished. So we really we base Scrum on a lot of many different factors, and there was a lot of other papers that were referred to as the new product development game that referred to Scrum. And Scrum really talks about moving from an individual focus to a more team-oriented focus. So Scrum, a good definition of it is, it's a framework in which people can address complex problems and productively and creatively deliver products to the highest possible value. So I encourage all of you to read the Scrum Guide. It's an 11-page document that really explains all the different things in detail. So the reason why it's great for complexity is we're able to inspect and adapt. Any picture can't be improved until the first line is drawn. So it really forces us to go from conceptualizing to doing, because it's usually the first step that's usually the hardest, and then we can steer to what we want afterwards. What we usually like to say is Scrum in itself, when you read the Scrum guide, it's only 10 or 11 pages. It seems deceivingly simple, and it is quite easy to learn. But what we like to say, it's difficult to master. Not until you use it a number of times and keep inspecting and adapting do you get to be really good at it. So it's not something that you become an expert on overnight. You learn it, but you learn how to adapt the practices and get more out of it the more times you use it. So Scrum in a nutshell is really, so let's say we have a start of a sprint in a 1 week sprint. A team will commit to work to deliver working software in 30 days. So the team gets to decide to pull what it thinks it can be done. It's a very pull mechanism where the team has the complete autonomy to realistically determine what they feel they can get done in that time frame. And then a time is scheduled to show that software, so they're going to go away and work in a week. And at the end of that 1 week, they're going to show what they produced. And then the team creates the software. And then the team offers their work for a bunch of people to give great input and feedback to it. Scrum is incredibly feedback driven, and that's what we want to, that's what makes it so powerful. We're trying to increase the feedback loops to give a lot of different levers for us to be able to either ship early, build a bit more to add on to a feature, to change the feature altogether. Scrum allows us to be human and not be able to predict everything for certain in the future. It allows us to be in an experimental mindset where we can build something, try it, experiment, try it, get better as a team doing different practices at delivering better software, get better at understanding who we're building the software for, so we move more together as we try to develop this. Now, an empirical process doesn't come for free. We really need trust and courage because, to be able to plan something in the beginning and be able to show something at the end takes courageous because you're putting yourself on the line. And there's a number of Scrum events that talk about. So some of the Scrum events are, we talked about the sprint planning, that everybody chooses the work they want to work in a week. Then they do a daily Scrum every day to really recalibrate every 24 hours because it's a feedback loop, right? So just like every sprint for a 1 week is a feedback loop, we also include a 24-hour feedback loop. But in one of the events is the sprint demo where we try to show the product, and we got to take feedback from the customer and many different stakeholders. And it takes courage because as much as we like feedback to improve, it still kind of makes you feel vulnerable to hear you did something wrong. And then the real thing in Scrum is the retrospective that drives it all, where the team in itself can look at the people, process, tools, and relationships with the team to really self-correct itself to see what it can do better. And that's what makes Scrum very powerful. You're doing all these, you're doing these feedback loops on the end of every day and the end of every sprint. So you don't need to have everything perfect before you start Scrum, because just the practice of using Scrum will help you get perfect. What I like about Scrum is it exposes everything. So that's why you need the trust and courage and transparency, because it's going to expose it. And you need an organization ability when you expose it to be able to do something about it, because it's a continual mechanism of improvement. You need to continually inspect and adapt. And without trust, courage, transparency, and the ability to inspect and adapt, we won't be able to go through the goal. And as you see here, here's a Dilbert slide that goes, makes joke of, how's your project coming along? He's talking to a fellow peer, and he says, it's a steaming pile of failure. And then he goes, it's like 15 drunken monkeys with a jigsaw puzzle. And then when somebody with authority comes or a customer coming, they say fine. If we don't have the trust and courage to be transparent, we can never inspect and adapt. So this is what really we need to build for Scrum to be sustaining. So like I mentioned earlier in the call, the way software used to be developed traditionally, we used to plan where we tried to plan for a year or a major release up front. And then we would do all the design. We would try to design everything, think of all the requirements. Then we would code it all. And then from being on traditional projects, I remember we'd be like, planning is supposed to be done on March 15th, check. Design should be done by, May 10th, check. Code should be done by, October, check. And then testing, oh, wait a minute. We're losing where we are because there's a lot of bug fix cycles. So it took numerous ways to get where we really are. Because the first three, we could probably try to measure in a more tangible fashion. But it wasn't until we began verifying and validating that we could. And because we did it so late, it required much more correction from the beginning of where the project started to then. And then we'd finally release, and then we would review to see how we do better as an organization, how do we do better on seeing what the customer liked on what we delivered. So where we moved to is Scrum really kind of puts all those different phases in a 1 week sprint, anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. And so they're doing all the, planning, designing, coding, and testing, and releasing all within that 1 week in the hopes of getting feedback. That's why it's important as teams mature, they get to done where they can easily potentially ship it and get more rapid feedback. And because we're doing it small and building on top of it as we go, additional features, we're able to course correct to get more of what the customer wants and to really inspect and adapt to get better as a team. The more we work together, the longer we work together, the way we develop, we get to get that rapid feedback to continually improve. So this is why if you look at how traditionally software developed, it was all or nothing. So you didn't have anything until the very end. Where in Scrum, we have everything at the end of every sprint, which could be anywhere from 1 week to a month. But there's always potentially working software available.
David, if I could, we had a question come in from one of our attendees.
Sure.
Sure. And Pat was asking, does the same team typically carry through the 30-day cycle, or can it change through the weekly Scrum?
No, you should keep the same team together because, and that's an excellent question. Thanks for asking because I missed a point. So if we look at how the work is estimated, the team pulls the work in, and when they estimate the work before they pull it in backlog refinement, they're really basing the estimate on those team members, what knowledge and skills that the team has as they're doing it. So, and then the team gets better. If they're going to continually get better over time, it's really long-served teams for a project are better. Because when you switch people in and out, they don't get to gel as a team, and it's hard to estimate based on different skill sets and different personality traits and stuff. So it's better to keep the same team together for the duration of the project, and it's even a better practice to have long-living teams.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. And yeah, thank you, Pat, for that question. So again, anyone else at any time, feel free to pop a question into the chat or the Q&A box.
Yeah, because I usually do a talk like this very interactive because, with Scrum being around as long as it is, everybody's read something about it. Everybody's tried a version. Everybody's done something. So it's hard to level set of where you start a webinar from based on everybody's understanding and experience. So if there's any questions, feel free to shoot them now. And, after I get through this slide, actually, I'll open it up to Q&A because I'd rather steer and be able to answer some good, hard, targeted questions because I don't really know, I can't really judge what you need to get out of this. So what I'm hoping you get out of this is why Scrum, why it's so powerful. If we look at these characteristics, the red line being traditional software and green being Scrum, it's visibility. So if you see this one, the first graph in the top left corner, as you see in traditional software development, we have a lot of visibility in the beginning. We have the project kickoff, everybody's ramped up, excited, we're going to deliver this fantastic project. And I've been part of these projects. And then over time, you kind of lose sight because you get stuck doing the analysis, design, coding, and testing. And you don't re-engage with everybody until the very end about release. Where Scrum, because we're doing it at the end of every sprint, the visibility has higher levels of engagement. So that's why it loops through the top and has many different touch points. And that's what makes Scrum so powerful because you're engaging more frequently, which allows you to have the ability to change. If you go to the next graph, you see the ability to change. Scrum really allows a high level of changing throughout the whole project because at the end of every sprint, you can decide to ship, cancel the project, or steer it, or keep going the course. Where in traditional software development, the ability to change got harder as we went on, which made us create these change management processes to make it difficult to change a project once it started. And really, that only allowed us to get software done, but it might have not have been the software that people were wanting to buy. And then if you look at the business value in the bottom left, because we order product backlog at the top, rated on value, we're always delivering the top value first. So that way we can always decide to ship a project because remember, in Scrum, we can potentially ship at any time. We want to make sure that release always is the highest value. So that's why we always, that Scrum allows you to deliver value quicker and more sooner. If you look at the traditional projects, they only get the value at the very end because we have the potential of really delivering it at the end of every sprint. We're really being able to deliver value more frequent and quicker. And as customers use it, it helps them understand more of what they want and maybe better yet, more of what they don't want. So that way we don't stop building features that nobody uses. And we usually say when the line becomes horizontal, that's when we should think the project's finished because we're not adding any more value. And then obviously what I love most about Scrum is it's an excellent risk mitigation tool because you're adapting and inspecting at the end of every sprint. You're able to really mitigate risk at its best. So these are the reasons why we go Scrum. I didn't really talk too much on the what Scrum and how it was. It's just when you're looking at it going, why should we go to Scrum? The real reason is we're human. We can't predict the future way on out. Scrum really allows us to not worry about the future, get building, and react to the feedback. So we might not be able to predict the future, but Scrum allows us to react quicker and be able to capture the present. And that's what we need. And it's a more fun way to deliver software. Because usually when I walk into organizations that are still running a traditional process, it's very quiet, it's very siloed. You know, people are kind of infighting between the developers keep making bugs, the testers keep finding things that aren't relevant. It really causes a lot of political grief. By putting these teams together to work together to own the complete responsibility to build software, kind of helps everybody be a part of it, and it makes it more collaborative, and there's better solutions because you got many different eyes looking at it, and you're thinking of everything from day one of the sprint, and not only when it enters that department.
David, if I could chime in quickly, a couple things. First off, your screen just went black.
Yeah, that was my last slide. I should have had a thank you on it.
Okay, no problem. So I have a couple questions that just come in then. So, okay, so that's of your presentation. That's the last one there. So here's a question from Tom. He's asking, how applicable are Scrum methods to software and IT implementations within a medium-sized business as opposed to specifically software development? So I guess IT implementations as opposed to software development, that's the thrust of that question.
Well, yeah, because IT is a little different because there is some ingrained dependencies. But still using it in Scrum allows you to inspect and adapt, right? So that way you're really kind of doing validation all the way throughout. So is he asking internal IT systems or infrastructure in particular?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his question, it did mention IT implementations, and yes, internal systems, say.
Yeah, so internal systems you can still run because you usually use a test environment, but you want to inspect and adapt and show the customer sooner. Now, what you want to do over time is there's still a gating process before it goes into production. You're going to need to work on that to make it more transparent. But the beauty of Scrum is, and we didn't talk about this in the talk at all, there's a definition of done where we try to make sure over time that we have the highest quality at the end of every sprint, so there's minimal risk to inject it into the system. So that way, once the stakeholder likes it, we can push a button and it's in production. So it works really good in medium IT companies to bring business and IT folks together because the business is with you throughout the whole sprint. So that way, by the time you come to the end of the sprint, it's much more easier, and you're doing smaller pieces. It's not as a big bang implementation, which exposes more risk. You're doing more smaller pieces.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're getting some great participation here. So here's a few more questions for you, David. I have a couple lined up. So first of all, Maxim is asking, can a release be to release a prototype with no functionality and then build on it, or does it have to be a working vision with very limited functionality?
Can you ask that one more time for me?
Sure. So could you release your actual release that you're doing? Could it be releasing a prototype with no functionality, and then you build upon that, or does it have to be a working version with very limited functionality?
Well, in both cases, you're getting feedback early, right? And whether you prototype or development, sometimes when you design a prototype, that's usually a spike within a sprint that you'll develop a prototype. If you need to figure it out, or if there's no even basis to start from, and the team needs to dedicate time, they might prototype. But what we really want to do is really get coding and getting it integrated right away. We see the biggest value is to do it right into product right away. But there is certain cases, even with a company now, that if there's something that the team has no idea where to start, we might do a spike in, which will be contained within a sprint to deliver a prototype. But you don't want to get in the habit of prototype, develop, because you're really then still doing a mini waterfall. So you really want to get where you're producing something at the end of every sprint that can be potentially shipped.
Okay, good. Well, I have 3 more questions. So Daryl, Jerry, and who is the last one from? Andrew. I'll get to your question. So first of all, Daryl was asking, do you have any favorite web services that you use in conjunction with Scrum to track projects?
Any web services to track projects?
Yeah.
Like we use Jira. I've seen many different tools to use, but the beauty of when you're on a Scrum project is at the end of every sprint, we know exactly where we're at. either for good or for worse, right, of how far we are to the finish line. There's many different tools out there that can help you track it. Hopefully it's as simple as can be, and that's why Scrum is always trying to start out so simple.
Okay, good. And Jerry asks, can you describe the activities of a daily Scrum, the process and the meeting?
Great question. Well, the Daily Scrum is probably the most underlooked Scrum event, but yet it's the most popular that people that say they're doing Scrum say they're doing it. The beauty of the Daily Scrum is it allows the team to have a touch point every 24 hours. So no matter if your sprint's 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4, every hour, or every day, minimally once a day, the team calibrates and sets the goal for the day. Because we're hoping in all those goals they reach their ultimate sprint goal. So usually in the Daily Scrum, the team gets together to ask a very few simple questions. What did we hope to complete yesterday? Did we complete it? What do we hope to complete today? And more important, what are kind of any impediments? That's usually the basis of it, but that way people can coordinate their work for the day. So if they need to work with each other, if they want to pair program, if they want to do it, they sync up. And the beauty of the Daily Scrum is it starts that collaboration going. As teams mature and get better at it, they meet all through the day and continually collaborate. But it's a great day to set a goal for the next 24 hours.
Okay, good. Thank you. So again, Jerry, if that answered your question, let us know. Andrew's asking, what steps can an organization working in a traditional environment, such as Gopher Farmed, waterfall method, etc., make to start moving to Agile Scrum? So if you're in a traditional environment, what are your initial steps in moving towards an Agile Scrum environment?
Well, if you want to just test the waters to see how it would work, you should assemble a cross-functional team. Because if they're in a traditional model, from my experience, they have different reporting managers of QA, development, BAs or whatever, and create a Scrum team that's cross-functional that can do a piece of work, and choose a piece of work that's big enough to matter, but small enough to, if it doesn't go right, you're not going to put the company in danger. And then really get them to work on some work and get somebody as a product owner role to represent the customer and business and just start doing it. Because you're going to learn what you need the more sprints, because at the end of every sprint, you get to see what went well, what didn't, and make that course correction in the midst of a project, where traditionally you couldn't, you only improved at the end of every project. Now we're improving all the way throughout the project. So there's no perfect time, but you want to get the cross-functional team members together first to sit together and to act as a team, and that can work undisturbed through the sprint, that they're dedicated for that initiative. And the hardest part is to get people to give up their people to give it a try.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up on Daryl had asked a question about web services to track your work, and I guess where he was coming from is that if your team is spread across different offices around the world, what kind of a web service can you use for tracking this kind of work? So, I'm thinking maybe a tool, perhaps he's referencing a tool like Asana or those different kinds of software that are used to track people's activities and progress, especially if they're spread out globally.
Right. And distributed teams are a reality. But really, you don't want to get out of... See, what I'm worried about when teams are distributed, not that are we tracking their daily progress, because we're working toward a sprint goal. My concerns is, are they able to commit to code frequently and early? Do they have the tools like Skype and others so they can collaborate? Because usually distributed teams aren't the problem, it's the different time zones. It's how they can collaborate. Because when you move to Scrum, you're going to notice tracking things on a daily basis are less important because you're committing to deliver at the end of every week, 2 weeks, or 4 weeks. So even if the team doesn't do great the 1 week sprint, they've only lost a week. That's the beauty of the risk mitigation. You haven't lost months and months of work. You've only lost a week of what you thought, and you can course correct. But because we're breaking it down into small, tiny pieces, measuring it on the daily activity is really no longer an issue because you're seeing something in the immediate future.
Okay, thank you. Andrew had a follow-up question. He was the one who asked about the initial steps moving to Agile and Scrum. And so he then asked about technical debt. So what's technical debt? And should that be prioritized? How can someone mitigate that? Well, I think, yeah, your email screens is just showing to us.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was trying to get to the chat window. Sorry, let me turn off sharing. So can you re-ask that question while I turn off?
So Andrew is asking, what is technical debt? And should he prioritize it, or how can he mitigate it?
That's a really tough question, and I like it. Technical debt, it depends. If it cripples the team to get to definition of done, then yes, you have to address it early, because that's a lot of teams struggle that we can't work in a sprint because if we work on one area of the product, it breaks all these other areas. So what you need to do is, and it's no different than any other methodology you use, you got to get the technical debt that affects any immediate work doing with putting so much of it in each sprint to try to reduce it.
Okay, thank you. Another question too, can Scrum work if you have a very small team, like 3 or 4 software developers?
Yeah, it can work with 3 to 4. Obviously, you don't want to get too big because then you lose the interaction of the team. Anytime you get over 7, you'll get people that don't actively collaborate and participate. When you get 3, you might not get as much work as you want, but it's still beneficial. I've seen teams work with 3 that get more done with teams than teams of 7 because they're able to interact, collaborate, and share the responsibilities. So really the number depends, and there's no science to it, right? That's why you do many inspects and adapts, right? Because we always say a Scrum team, I can't remember now, I'm having a mental block, is no more than 7, no fewer than 2. But really the right size will determine the more times you use Scrum and you experiment.
Okay, excellent. I'm not seeing any more questions, so again, we still have a little bit of time. That was great, David, that you were able to leave us some time for some questions. So again, here's your opportunity to tap into one of Canada's leading authority on Agile and Scrum. And so if you have any more questions, please do so. One thing I'll mention, I'll just send out to the attendees, is that in about a month's time, May 16 to 17, David will be teaching a course with us here at CTC Train Canada, and that's Professional Foundations of Scrum. So if you're really wondering where to go from here, what's your next step, this is really a perfect starting point for your Scrum journey. And maybe, David, if you just want to give us a little bit of a teaser as to what will be covered in this course on May 16, 17.
Absolutely. What I love about this course is it's hands-on. You're going to be learning Scrum because you're going to be doing Scrum in the class. You're going to build something as separate teams, and then through course, and we're going to go through the theory of Scrum while we're doing it, but we're actually taking the Scrum methodology and using it to teach the course. So it's not a class that you can sit in and be idle. It's not Lego blocks that you're going to be building things. You're actually going to build something technology related to be able to learn Scrum.
Okay, excellent. And don't misspell it like I just did in the chat box there of it's Scrum, not Skirm that we'll be teaching. So yeah, thank you for that. And we also on that same date, depending if you're looking to pursue certification, we are offering a course on Professional Scrum Master. So if you're looking to achieve that accreditation from scrum.org, we're also running that course on May 16 and 17. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So again, we had great participation. Thank you all for attending. Thanks to those who were able to pose some questions. Hopefully this was beneficial and you'll be able to take something back to the workplace for you as you go along on your Scrum implementation. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, David. And someone just asked, yes, I will be sending out a link to the recording. So that'll go out within the next few days. If you missed something, come back to our website, but an email will be going out as well with this recording. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.